Welcome back to So You Really Want to Learn Latin, and today we are going to be looking at passive imperatives. Now you will remember, I'm sure, that imperatives are the part of a verb that we use to give a command. So for example, when you say run away or come here, you are using an imperative. Now so far we've only learned how to use an imperative in the active voice. That is to say, do it. And we learnt that imperatives for ammo were amar and amarte. Amar being the singular form if you're talking to one person. So you might want to say to one person, love your mother. That would be amar matrem. And if you're talking to more than one person, you go amarte matrem. Love your mother. All of you should love your mother. Okay, so amar and amarte. For moneo verbs it was mone and monete. For rego verbs it was rege and regite. For audio verbs it was audi and audite. And for the mixed conjugation verbs like capio it was cape and capite. Okay, so that's how imperatives worked in the active voice. Now we're going to have a look at how they work in the passive. Now first of all, what on earth would it mean? Now it's not a very common thing really to have an imperative in the passive, but if you think in English of a phrase such as be warned, I am going to insist upon this. That phrase, be warned, was using a passive imperative. Okay, so we need to know how verbs would form their imperative in the passive if ever we wanted to use it. Okay, now it's actually quite easy, and I'm just going to teach you how to do it, and then we're done. So in the singular, okay, if you're just talking to one person and you want to give them a command in the passive, really simple. It is exactly the same form as the present infinitive of the verb. Okay, so amare, as well as meaning to love, it also means be loved when you are talking to one person. Okay, amare means be loved. Monere means be warned. Regere means be ruled. Audire means be heard. And capere means be captured or be taken. Okay, so the singular passive imperative of a verb is identical to its present infinitive. Okay? And if you want to make that plural, if you're talking to more than one person, then again, it's a form we already know. It is identical to the second person plural of the present passive of that verb. So, for amo, that would be amarmini. Think of that. Amor, amaris, amartur, amarmur, amarmini, amantur. That was the present passive of amo. So you go for the second person plural, amarmini, and that is your plural passive imperative. And that works for all the others. Moneor, moneris, monetur, monemo, monemini, monentur. So, monemini is the passive imperative in the plural for moneo. For rego, it's regimini. For audio, it's audimini. And for capio, it's capimini. Okay, so actually, not too much to get concerned about here. We have the concept that an imperative can be passive. We know how to form these passive imperatives should you ever need them, and let's be honest, they're not wildly common things. But should you need to form the passive imperative when you're just giving the command to one person, you use the present infinitive of the verb. It's as simple as that, amare, monere. And if you want to talk to more than one person and give more than one person this passive imperative, be warned, all of you, then you go for the second person plural, that's the you plural form, the second person plural, present passive of that verb. So we get amamini, monemini, regimini, audimini, and capimini. Okay, so nothing too tricky there. Now, just before we leave imperatives, there are some irregular imperatives which are quite handy to learn. So if we just quickly do the imperatives of those verbs. Now, for sum, you'd expect it to be a bit peculiar. We haven't talked about the imperative of sum, I don't think. It's irregular. Okay, so if you want to say be, and you're talking to one person, it's es. And if you're talking to more than one person, it's este. Okay, so the imperatives of the verb sum are es and este. And you can't have that in the passive. Think about it. How would you be beed? Can't be done. Okay, so sum, the imperatives are es and este. The verb duco, okay, slightly irregular imperative in the singular active. So the imperatives of duco are duc and ducite. Okay, duc is irregular. It should really be duque, but it isn't. It's just duc, and the plural is normal, ducite. The verb dico is also similar to that. It's dic and dicite. Okay, again, it's not dique, it's just dic. So dic and dicite. For the verb facio, it's fac and facite. So again, it doesn't have that E on the end of the singular imperative form. You've got to be a little bit careful with the pronunciation of this. It can sound a little bit rude, but I'll give you the spelling. So it's, and you can see that if you were to pronounce that, it might sound a bit rude. Okay, moving on. We've got from the verb eo, we've got e and ite. So that's go in the singular and the plural, e and ite. And then from ferro, we've got in the singular active, we've got fer. Okay, F-E-R, fer, that means carry, and ferte, meaning carry if you're talking to lots of people. So fer and ferte. And then actually passive imperatives, you're never going to need to learn an irregular form because actually they are always what you'd expect. So for example, with ferro, it's an irregular verb. We've just seen that it's active imperative, so a bit peculiar, fer and ferte. But the passive imperatives of that are entirely regular. It's ferre and ferimini. That's what you'd expect. It's what we've just learned. Passive imperatives are exactly the same as the present infinitive in the singular and the second person plural present passive in the plural. Okay? So, it's really just as we're talking about imperatives, let's just nail those irregular imperatives of those verbs. So, sum, es and este, duco, duc and ducite, from dico, dic and dicite, from facio, fuck and facite, being a bit careful about our pronunciation for that one, eo, e and ite, and finally ferro, fer and ferte. Right, that's all I want to say about imperatives. We've now nailed them in the active and in the passive, and we've pointed out a few irregular imperatives which perhaps we should have mentioned earlier. Okay, we're now going to have a little bit of practice. So we are right at the end now of book 2. We are in chapter 10. Blimey, if we turn the page, there's almost nothing left. Terribly sad. So we're going to have a quick go at some of the stuff on exercise 10.6. So we've got some nice little sentences to translate into Latin, always my favourite stuff. Okay, so the first one we're going to do is be brave, soldiers. Okay, so we want to be brave, soldiers. So we need the imperative of the verb to be. Okay, and we need it in the plural because we're talking to soldiers. Okay, so be brave. Este fortes. Be, that's the plural imperative. Este, brave. Fortes in the nominative plural, masculine, agreeing with soldiers. And then we're talking to soldiers, so we put them in the vocative plural, milites. Okay? Este fortes, milites. Okay, we'll do another one. Marcus, lead the slaves home. Okay, so we're talking to Marcus, so we put him in the vocative. Marke. Oh, Marcus. Now, lead the slaves home. So our verb is this imperative, lead. Now we're talking to just Marcus, so we want the singular imperative. So that's now, we've just learnt it, it's duc. Okay, lead the slaves, they are the object, servos, and lead them home. Don't know if you remember my lovely little rule about towns, small islands, domus and rus. So when you go to or from a town, small island, domus or rus, you do not use a preposition. But you put the noun into the case it would have gone into had you used the preposition. Okay, so that's the accusative. So domum. So that whole thing, marke. Duc servos domum. And you can play around with the order for that, you know, move it into a slightly more Latin sounding order. So maybe marke servos domum duc. Maybe something like that. Okay, we'll do another one. We've got carry the water into the town itself, boy. Okay, so we've got boy at the end telling us that we're only talking to one person, so it's singular. Okay, so carry the water into the town itself, boy. Right, if we just do it in the order that this comes, it's easier. Carry the water. Oh, and we've been asked to use ferro, not porto. Okay, so we need the singular imperative for ferro. That's fer aquam, so carry the water, into the town, in plus the accusative, in oppidum, and it's into the town itself. So we need our nice little pronoun we've just learnt, ipse, meaning self, and that's got to agree with oppidum, which was accusative neuter singular. So we go for ipsum. That's from ipse, ipsa, ipsum, ipsum, ipsam, ipsum. Okay, so fer aquam in oppidum ipsum, and then we're talking to the boy, puer. So again, you might swing that around and go puer. In oppidum ipsum aquam fer, or, you know, a variation on that. Okay, and we'll just do one more. We'll make this one up. It's not in the book, but we might have be warned by the words of the king himself. Flavia. Okay, so it's going to be singular because we're talking to one person, Flavia. So Flavia, there's our vocative, we're talking to Flavia. And we're going for be warned by the words of the king himself. So be warned, monere, that's a passive imperative in the singular. Monere, by the words, verbis, okay, ablative plural of verbum, by the words, verbis, of the king himself, regis ipsius. Okay, right, that's all there is really to know about imperatives. They're pretty easy things, not massively common. In a passage of Latin where there is either an imperative or even a passive imperative, you quite often get an exclamation mark, which sort of helps you along. But don't count on that, it may or may not be there. Okay, right, almost finished for this book now. We will see you back on this channel very soon for some more Latin, but until then, keep up the good work.